Welcome to the Backlash at Backlash.com. My name is Rod Van Mecklin, and in this video I'm going to read part 3 from my 1992 article, Sexual Harassment, Socially Castrating Inconvenient Men. The footnoted article is linked below. 1992, Bellevue, Washington. Male vulnerability ignored. Men feel just as victimized as women do. What's more, men feel far more threatened within the context of affiliation and intimacy, whereas women feel more at risk within the context of impersonality and competitive success. Hence, there must be some other reason for such hypersensitivity as reflected by this standard, particularly since so many women see the workplace as the best place to meet men. Perhaps women feel threatened by men's sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature, not because they perceive any danger of rape or sexual assault, but because attention from unattractive men is both common and a nuisance. Quote, "The average young woman has so many men with a sexual interest in her that she may feel overwhelmed." Close quote. Roy Schenck, The Other Side of the Coin. Socially castrating inconvenient men. Hostile environment sexual harassment provides a convenient way for women to control inconvenient men, portraying even the kindest comments from men as threats dripping like blood-drenched blades with malicious lasciviousness and vile carnality, requiring the imposition of harsh penalties. They have codified into law the means for socially castrating men who get in their way. Quote, "Well-intentioned compliments by coworkers or supervisors can form the basis of a sexual harassment cause of action if a reasonable victim of the same sex as the plaintiff would consider the comment sufficiently severe or pervasive to alter a condition of employment and create an abusive working environment." Close quote. Ellison versus Brady. Compliment or ask a female coworker out and you risk a charge of sexual harassment. There is no objective standard. Sexual harassment is unacceptable and we should treat it as such. But how are men to know what it is? What's the objective standard? Quoting from the Civil Rights Act of 1964, quote, "In determining whether sexual harassment is sufficiently severe to be actionable, court focuses on perspective of victim." Close quote. That is, the objective standard is, it's objective. What was the perspective of the victim? How would a reasonable woman feel about it? General legal standards are necessary because it's impossible for courts and legislatures to foresee every situation possible and pass laws to address them all. But such standards must be universal. A law or legal standard that depends on gender is no different from a standard that depends on race. A reasonable white person standard to define unlawful behaviors on the basis of race would clearly be prejudicial. And so is the reasonable woman standard. It's not universal, but discriminates on the basis of sex. Can you imagine a reasonable white person standard that says that if blacks behave a certain way and whites perceive a threat to it, that they can say, well, they created a hostile environment because they're black? Insanity. Feminists have persuaded judges, legal scholars, politicians, professors, and corporate executives to judge men by anti-male standards. By this cause, the only standard men can rely upon is fear of women, because the segregation of these standards institutionalizes the feminist promulgated fear of men into law, thereby putting all men legally at risk for doing what most women expect and demand that men do. Take the initiative in creating relationships. So, is it time to boycott women? Despite all the chatter about equality, most women still expect men to take the initiative. This means men are now caught in a catch-22. Play it legally safe and risk permanent sexual solitude, or risk charges of sexual harassment in their quest for love. Consequently, so long as women don't share the burden of asking for dates or making the first move, some men will continue to engage in behaviors some will call sexual harassment. How should men deal with this? Maybe the time has come for men to boycott the initiative, refuse to initiate relationships and sexual advances until women demand an objective standard, so men can know ahead of time with certainty what is legal and what is not. Or perhaps men should begin filing sexual harassment suits of their own under the reasonable victim standard. Sexual harassment of men. How can you sexually harass sex-starved men? The same way that you harass a person who's dying of hunger or thirst, by holding what they need just out of reach. Essentially, that's what every woman who wears makeup and sexy outfits does. She flaunts her sexuality, then snatches it away when the wrong man responds. If a reasonable man would find that women's provocative dress, makeup, and suggestive or flirtatious behaviors are sufficiently severe or pervasive to alter the conditions of employment and create an abusive working environment, then by the reasonable victim standard, those things would be sexual harassment. Does a woman who wears a short skirt to work make it hard for her male coworkers to concentrate? No pun intended. Then she's guilty of sexual harassment. When she shows a little cleavage, is she tantalizing them with her sensuality? Then she's guilty of sexual harassment, even if that's not her intention. Because guess what, feminists? Women have nothing to say about what men perceive as conduct of a sexual nature. Most women will certainly reject this, but they have no say in determining what sexually harasses men, because when the court established a uniquely female reasonable woman standard, it created a uniquely male reasonable man standard too. Quote, "Of course, where male employees allege that coworkers engage in conduct which creates a hostile environment, the appropriate victim's perspective would be that of a reasonable man." Close quote. Ellison versus Brady. It's important for men to know this, because sexual harassment will not remain just a workplace issue. Remember, I wrote this in 1992. Soon, women may be able to sue men for sexual harassment for asking them out for dates no matter where they are, because feminists are working to move this issue beyond the confines of the workplace to place men at risk in the public domain too. In part 4 of this series, I'll conclude with No Safe Place, Sexual Harassment in the Public Domain. That's all for now. Check out the other videos, subscribe to the channel. For the Backlash at Backlash.com, my name is Rod Van Mechelen.